Hello, 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 and welcome to this, our match between Leal and Setsuna Faseye, otherwise known as the illustrious Sortie Rom, at the TemTeam Cup. Obviously, this is the May edition once again, so we will be shortly getting into our first of our best of two between these charming contestants. Sortie Rum, you might know him, you might love him, you might know a lot about him from various different other streams in which he's a great fixture of. And of course, Leal is the one of the Jank Masters of Paradox Engine himself. This should be a very interesting match. We'll be waiting for them to hop in shortly, and I can't wait. Honestly, things should be pretty interesting. We're just waiting for them to decide who invites, and then we'll be getting straight into the thick of it. I think it's going to be very exciting indeed. Well, in the meantime, we're just waiting for everything to get set up there, but yeah, should be very interesting to see. Just looks like they're close to getting in. Now, I don't really know what either of them are running at the moment. I haven't had much of a chance to see Sortie Rom in the thick of battle as of yet. I know they've picked up a number of the new Suppanku Tems, and I know they've been working on some hedge-in recently. Could see some of that. I genuinely do not know anything about what Leal is bringing to this, though. However, I can, of course, report to previous instances of Leal just popping off and crafting some absolute god-tier shenanigans out of pre-existing matches. So I'm sure we'll have nothing but good stuff to look forward to there. With this in mind, we're just waiting with bated breath for our contestants, who I'm sure will be up and ready in just a moment. If you haven't checked us out before, do make sure to follow, just to make sure that you are available and present for when we are next around and doing things. Obviously, there will be a number of scattered matches all through this week and the next, because one of the ways that we're doing this is more ad hoc and dissociated planning that allows everybody to generally be available. This has ultimately worked out fairly well for everybody, and does lead to smaller bite-sized segments for you and I to enjoy together. Looks like we'll just be waiting one extra minute for one of our contestants to be ready, and then we'll be off to the races. Now, once again, it is going to be pretty interesting seeing what both of them actually get up to here. I personally have it on good authority that Sortie Rom likes identifying key meta things and playing off them, so I do think we're going to see some big meta, off-meta play here. That said, I've been surprised before in these playoffs. Just previously, we had Nekablocky lose to Wiki in a stunning 2-0 against a Golzi, which was, of course, a very maligned Tem in this current competitive environment. The absence of status being something of a black mark against it. However, given the Ginu treatment, it was able to tear apart Nekablocky's comparatively frail team. It looks like, once again, Bulk is starting to make a comeback. Now, Leal's no stranger to Bulk when he really gets into it. Of course, one of his Club Wars debuts was, of course, a double relax team back in Kisiwa. Now, I have no idea if he's trying the same kind of stuff here, but I'm very interested in seeing what happens as a result. Looks like they've just gotten in, so I'm just going to get us to check on over to them. And here we are. So, getting into our first match, of course, we have Leal inviting in our first of the two, and then after that, of course, depending on the victor, I believe, that is what determines the next one after that. And as we look, we do indeed see mostly some pretty conventional threats on Sortie Rom's side, with one key exception, and that is the 2-Vine. I don't see nearly as many 2-Vines as I normally do. And if we look at Leal's team, it is just a treat. Actually, these are some Tems you don't usually get to see. Now, Obviously, there's some of these ones that you see, like, you know, that you see a bit of, like, you know, your Yukama, your Size Munch, etc., etc., etc. We don't see any Acronox in contemporary play. Like, I see more Inkies than I do Acronox, and we don't see many Inkies either. Inky, of course, having a 4 times weakness to Earth, and middling speed makes it a bit of a glass cannon that requires a lot of delicate support to use effectively. Acronox, despite having a great set of combos with a lot of other Tems, tends not to pop off very well on its own and requires good support. We do see the Yukama Acronox combo here, though, so we could very well see something go well with that. The Yukama Acronox combo, of course, being speed tiering your Yukama and your Acronox, so that way you get the poison on your opponent first, allowing for sweet, sweet Venom Spread plays. Now, moving into the actual pick bans here, we do see the instant Kinu ban from Leal. This is, of course, very important whenever you see a Kinu Yowler to ensure that the combo is not presented against you. Otherwise, Yowler can very quickly, with protector buffs, become far too hard for people to go for. Now, the Valorand is banned. This is something I keep seeing as of late, is that Valorands, not only do they just keep appearing, they also don't stop. They're just all over the place. They're a little extra, if you don't mind me saying, given the fact that we expected these things to be dead and gone. Still, though, that has not been the case. We see a first pick of Mashuk out of Leal. So that should be a fun thing to start right there. This, of course, means that we've got the potential for... Oh, no, are we going double Two-Vine? That's actually a little risky, if you ask me. So... if Mimit is picked in your second slot, that means it copies the first Tem you bring out. If you put it in the first slot, it copies the second Tem your opponent brings out. So with this, if Sortirum picks this, it is double Two-Vine all the way. So we got a couple jeweled birds leading us off on Sortirum's side. Now, granted, with Mashuk, that's pretty risky, but I honestly think with a Yukama in the second slot, this could very quickly turn into a dead Two-Vine turn 1. Now... this also depends on precisely how resilient the Yukama is, but Yukamas can be built very sturdy. Oh, no, instead we see a Mashuk Size Munch. Yeah, this weathers that opener a bit more easily from Leal, and honestly, it looks pretty intimidating. So we'll have to see how this goes. We are entering our second bans, and this is actually where it's going to be pretty interesting, because I think that it's going to be harder to disrupt the water cannon combos here than it is just to ensure that we don't have too much replicability. But instead, Sortirum does go to ban the Yukama, which is, of course, pretty powerful into some of his team. I feel like he does have the Mashuk, though, alongside the Osiara. Like, it walls some things. I'm not entirely sure if that's your first choice, but it is also very powerful against the two Two-Vines, which he does appear to be leaning on pretty heavily. So that should be fun to look at. Right. In the meantime, with Leal, obviously, right. Fire Koish, I don't think is a very big problem. We have Nature Koish and it is left unbanned. Valish is always kind of a concern, but we have 2 Earths, so that could be less of a concern. We also have a Mashuk. The opposing Mashuk is actually something I think is reasonable for him to get rid of, because it walls almost everything, and Leal agrees. He immediately goes for that after a bit of sort of contemplation right there. Just goes straight for the Mashuk ban and into the Mimit pick, which allows him a bit more versatility and potentially some double Size Munch plays. Double Size Munch plays are some really fun things. We can see that in a lot of the starters. Like, you drop a Mimit next to them and they immediately get their synergy and pop off. It is very impressive to see. So Sortirum is hovering over the Osiara, which is a good bit of counterplay to the Size Munch, but is very not good into Mashuk. They complement each other well into that, and there's also still a Nature Koish on this team, and a whole bunch of other things that really don't like Osiara. Yeah, we see the Yowler picked instead. Is this going to be a Yowler Fire Koish? It is a Yowler Fire Koish into this. Makes a lot of sense. We've still got a lot of water pressure into some of the Earth types that we see here, and most importantly, fire into things like Inky. Acronox is kind of held in check by Yowler, and of course the two Two-Vines. So there's a lot of different things that hopefully will keep Sortirum at bay in terms of that. In the meantime, we see the Nature Koish and Acronox get picked, so we do have a chance at some sweet, sweet Venom Spreader tech. So I'm very interested in seeing if that actually winds up coming to fruition. One of the things I'm always interested in when I see a Leal game is, does he actually get to enact his plan, or is he forced to play the game plan of his opponent? So with Sortirum final picking Osiara, an interesting pick, given that both of them are kind of awkward into the teams that we've seen right now. with Valish, of course, being countered by the lead and OCR getting countered by the back, we see the first of our 2 matches between Leal and Sortirum, and it's double 2-vine. This is quite a thing for Leal to break at the start of this match. Now, if these are appropriately like aggressive melees, then one of these birds may very well be going down. I think this is a risky opener from Sortirum, given that the size bunch was chosen here. If this is like an uppercut into uppercut lead and these 2-vines can't take the double, that could be ruinous. Now, that said, 2-vine has an excruciatingly high physical defense, one of the highest in the game. If anything is able to withstand a double in of these, it's that. And additionally, if we check, we do also see that there's a number of good-ish swap-ins for melee for Sortirum. Now, specifically, when I say good-ish, I mean Yowler can come in on one of those slots and it doesn't hurt so bad. That's not the best, but it's something. Additionally, the potential of an Osiara coming in and eating things is also pretty good because you're not guaranteed wastewater here. It's not actually going to do very much. This means unless Leal's reading that, it's pretty safe. Now, that said, I haven't really talked about the threat of a double Feathergat onto Mashuk, because I'm assuming this is a parrier Mashuk. If this is a tireless Mashuk, it might very well die turn 1. I don't believe this is a tireless Mashuk, though. So we do see one of the 2-vines vanish immediately for a Fire Koish. A Fire Koish could very well eat some of this aggression. We see the Feather Gatling come in almost experimentally, and yes, it is a parrier Mashuk, very much capable of eating that. The heat up comes down from Size Munch, which is always kind of a frightening thing to see in the first uppercut comes in onto that 2-vine, bringing it down to 54%. If we check that, we notice that is also a War Drum and a Sweatband on these 2 opening boys. So that's already looking pretty spooky on Leal's side. He's cemented his position a bit. He's gotten his heat up off. The Water Cannon is definitely frightening, but is it enough to actually scare Sortirum out of a scenario here? Now, one thing we could very well see is like a double... I don't like the double swaps, actually, the more I think about it. Like, yeah, you could go for that, but the Mimic's on the board, so you can't get any, like, Size Munch Transformatos off here. The OCR is too frail to eat these hits effectively. Like, really what Sortirum has to do is just try to take down some of these things before they take him down. And with a +2 priority Size Munch's Rex staring him in the face, this is looking like a bit of a tall order. Now, I don't think this is I don't think this is just sort of a solved lead at all. I think that first off, a tornado off of 2-vine doesn't get affected by parrier, and this Mashuk has no defensive item. This could very well, with like a double in of Ketsa into that slot, actually be enough. The problem is the Ketsa will not outspeed. So that could be rough, and we could still see some devastation here. The Tornado, however, might tilt things. Often, Mimics are faster and more aggressively spec'd than any other Tem on that roster. Now, this is a mixed team, so we could even see some mixed spreads off of this, or alternately, it could have like just 0 in both offenses. This is something else that we see on occasion. But yeah, coming out of Leal's side, I don't see any reason for him to change his board state at all. He's sitting pretty comfy. He looks to be outspeeding this turn and can confirm the KO on Firequash with a Wastewater if he so chooses. The Tornado will smack if magically this 2-vine survives, but if the only way this 2-vine survives is if it turns into the true 2-vine, and that 2-vine magically survives, which we may very well see. Proteus has swapped, and Flake the Osiara has hit the field instead. We're seeing a Lava Wave for priority coming in here. But the wreck comes first, and how much damage is this going to do to the frail Osiara? It actually gets Osiara down to below half, and the Firequash just survives. The Ice Cubes comes down, outspeeding the Mashuk, and getting the Size Munch down to 58%, and the Koish isn't targeted. This is actually really good for Sortirum, all things considered. Yeah, right, you still lost over half, like well over half your HP on both of your Tems, but like you just stared an atom bomb in the face. +2 Size Munch is something that you either have a resisted swap for or you really eat it. And the only resisted thing has entered the board. That is, however, if we look a double screen horse. So this is obviously a little bit bulkier than some of the other ones we've seen thus far. So that could be one of the things that influences this as we move forward. Now, Obviously, the rubber band's a bit on the other claw here. The big question now is, does this Size Munch outspeed this OCR? We know this is a bulky OCR, so the question is, does this have enough speed as an OCR to outspeed whatever Luke Leal has on his Size Munch? Because Dim Mak is something that is available to the Size Munch. It is 3 priority, and it will just straight up remove the rest of OCR's HP before the Whirlwind goes off, if it outspeeds. Speed Arrow is currently in Luke Leal's corner, so this means that if there is a speed tie, he will of course be the victor of that. But we don't know the speed tier. We don't know the actual speed invests of these two Tems. Now OCR is a higher speed tier, so it'll be easier for the OCR to outspeed, but we don't know that. And that could very well be something that turns on a dime right now. Outside of that, we also have the threat of a lava wave, which I guess Luke Leal is respecting as he brings in his own nature coach, which could actually eat it to a lava wave if that's coming, but will certainly eat the aquatic whirlwind. That is definitely charging into that. So that clearly shows that he anticipated that he would not outspeed and therefore went for a defensive swap. The hypnosis on the Mashuk, though, is real painful. Sortirum, identifying the fact that he outsped the previous turns with the previous turn with Fire Quaish was like, all right, cool. I'm really going to mess you up with some control here. This is another good option open to fast Quaish, and also why you kind of want to run speed on your Mushroom. Mashuk, when it's slow, can't do nearly as much of its job. Now, times used to be it had a nice 4 priority turbo choreography to help that work. Now that's just 2 prios. It's a lot harder to use, so that often needs to be paid forward in the TV spread rather than anywhere else. But that's a hard thing to do for our lower base speed Mashuk. It's no slouch, but it's no Ociara. With this in mind, it's pretty easy, I think, for Luke Leal to reposition here, because if we look, Sortirum's left something open here. His Ociara is on the right slot. This means that if Luke Leal chooses, he could swap in his Mimit right now and take that. Now, that said, Sortirum has swapped to... Oh, actually, this still works out for him, because if this is a Fire Quaish, that's kind of a nightmare. So we get our Fire Quaish, we get a Lava Wave onto the Quaish. There's no swap from Luke Leal. As I'm assuming he's just going straight for the Water Cutting Lily, or... no, a Water Cannon. On to Geyser, finishing it off. Still a fair bit of investment for that, and we still have another Fire Quaish there to cause problems for Luke Leal. But that said, the first blood in this game goes to Luke Leal as he finishes off that Fire Quaish. Now, however, we do have the Fire Quaish Yowler board state, which is definitely a frightening thing to see. This is a camo bear as well, so there's no control on this boy down. You can't fully lower its attack either. You tenderness it down. It will still get, currently, of course, the comebacker proc thanks to a bug, and of course the ability to still swap back later on and get all its attack back. So you gotta be careful about how you deal with this guy. And if you're gonna focus it early, you focus it hard. Because, of course, if you don't, then it's going to hibernate, and then everything comes back up. With, after, of course, 2 hold, it just having the ability to regain the vast majority of its health, I believe like 75% or something like that, and then half its stamina again on top of that, with the only downside countered by the very immunity that it's currently bearing. So that's something of a concern for Luke Leal. Obviously, he comes into this with a plan. He rarely ignores these kinds of things when he's looking at these kinds of boards. So that should be a very interesting thing for him to see. We see the Nature Quaish bounce, as instead he goes for the Mimit and decides to wall off Sortirum altogether. He says, okay, right, you can't break one of these guys, try breaking either of them. So he brings in his other Mimit, which does appear to be very bulky, given, well, okay, I say very bulky. I haven't actually seen how much damage this would have done to the other one, as a quick attack from the other Mashuk there knocks out the Fire Quaish, and we're left with a bear that did get a free turn to show off. That is concerning. But if both of these mushrooms have tenderness, then this thing's gonna get locked down super hard. The 2-Vine comes in, and this is kind of a tricky board state for Sortirum. I feel like he wants to really pressure one of these mushrooms, but it's the question of how much room they're going to actually create on the board before they leave. Because the thing about Parry Mashuk is, unless you hit it hard in a single turn, it's going to just carve a bloody swath, slowly but surely, eroding at your board state. As we've seen already out of Sortirum, who is 2 down and a horse at like 12% versus the comparatively very good board state of Luke Leal. So the perfect jab starts to come in on Yowler. With that, we also see an Urushiol on the Tuvine. I'm actually surprised to see the Urushiol, whether that was expecting a swap or something. Either way, it's not going to take out the Tuvine before the Tuvine starts throwing damage onto the board itself. And this is exactly the opening that Sortie Rum wanted, as Mashuk A is blown out of the water. Now, granted, they've already created a bit of space. The poison takes on Tuvine, and of course the minus defense on the Yowler will make both of these threats much easier to take down. This is the role of Mashuk. It's not the thing that takes things down, but everything else there works out very well indeed, and generally sort of it's the kind of thing that it will create space for everybody else on your team very effectively. I mean, it can also punch a Wolfie in the face. That's something it can do. But in this case, it has definitely carved the field open for Sizemunch, which is more than ready to get itself holed up for the next Sizemunch's wreck. We do see the Tornado come down on its other synergy partner, though, which could be kind of a tricky problem there. We see the uppercut hit onto the Tuvine, and yeah, no, Sortie Rum is paying in blood for that, as the Tuvine goes down instantly, and another perfect jab lands on the Yowler. This is looking frightening. The Hibernate comes down, and Sortie Rum is going to want to bounce, because that bear's health is going to go right back down closer to the red in no short order. So, with this in mind, we do see the OCR hit the board again. It does not actually, no, it does have priority now because of the way Hurry Wart works. Hurry Wart triggers every single time OCR hits the field. So every time it hits the field, you gotta be like, oh no, that's an aquatic whirlwind staring me in the face. It's one of the beautiful things about OCR is that it's all burst damage, and it gets its burst damage online every time it hits the field. Very frightening threat so long as it has stamina. I could natter on for a while about how glad I am that they made OCR the thing it is rather than a copy of Yukama, which also is its own distinct, really good water type. But in the meantime, the thing that it's doing right here is scaring the pants off of this Sizemunch, which otherwise would be in a fine position to do things on this board. We have an Acronox that could potentially soak those attacks, but like, you don't really want to be eating those things with an Acronox. We have a Water Coish that, Nature Coish that probably wants to be doing more, coming in on an open field and tearing things apart, rather than just doing things on its own sim. But given there's no actual synergy partners alongside that, that could be reasonable fodder, given there's only the OCR and the Yowler left. Leal could in fact even keep these things in here, confident that he can press the advantage with the Thames later on, given the fact that Acronox is still no slouch in the killing OCR department, and neither is Nature Coish in throwing out offensive pressure onto that Yowler potentially. So, the Aquatic Whirlwind does go down. Sizemunch calls the bluff. Leal calls the bluff, and Sizemunch just goes straight down into the dumpster, just getting, hard hit from that. And as we can see, the Yowler's taken a heavy blow from this Mimit as well. The wastewater bringing it right down to 54% once again. So, it looks like Leal's comfortable just creating space and turning that into the board state he wants, but I hope he can keep this pace. I'm fairly certain that he can, because a Sting is 3 prio off of Acronox, and in the meantime, so is the Water Cutting Lily from Coish. So he's almost guaranteed to outspeed these threats, unless this OCR is just obscenely fast and outspeeds with 2 prio. But the thing is, 2 prio moves off a base 100 speed is fairly easy to outspeed, as we can see right here, as the Acronox stings the OCR into submission, and the Water Cutting Lily is going to come down like a mighty force on this Yowler, which goes down to 0.6% before Oshi dashing the Acronox down to 7.7%. Xing for the victory for Leal. Well played out of Leal, keeping good control over that board state and making sure that despite the fact that Sortie Rum brought the big guns, he was unable to use the big guns effectively. Definitely an interesting thing to see as we go into our next game, slowly but surely. Very, very good showing out of both of our contestants there. Sortie Rum definitely brought the fire. I do like seeing Tuvine, obviously, and it should be interesting seeing if anything adapts there. I feel like Mashuk did a ton of work for Leal into the offensive core of Sortie Rum. He really didn't have too many answers for that. So I'm wondering if perhaps he bans that first next time. So we'll have to see that as we move into our next match, which I'm sure will be just a moment. Ah, man. I just love seeing matches like that because it's also a good way to showcase, even though we didn't see very much of Acronox, you'll still notice Sting actually performed a very good role there, being able to outspeed Osiara at a key moment when it didn't have the priority ready, which is something you really want in a Tem like that. Otherwise, it can be really frustrating taking Osiara down before it just carves another hole in your team. And if you're sweeping up in the late game, you don't have time for that. And with that, we're getting into our second match. So here we are, our second of the best of two between Sorty-Rum and Luke Leal. This time Sorty-Rum is inviting, so he of course gets counter pick on the first, but this also means that Luke Leal gets last pick. This is one of the joys in the ways that pick ban has been changed between them. Really interesting to see. So, as we wait for both of our contestants to ready up, I'm really excited to see if this draft changes at all. Definitely the sort of thing that I like seeing is people adapting to each other. Now, as it stands, the Yukama was still kind of something that would have been very threatening out of Sorty-Rum. Well, like towards Sorty-Rum, but oh man. I don't know if maybe that stays banned. I just feel like perhaps making sure that Mashuk is first banned is probably going to be better. But the problem is the Valorant is just as much of a threat. Like, you let that thing just stomp all over your team, and it's a problem. And it takes an equivalent amount of damage as Mashuk does from the 2-Vine. I suppose the next question here is, does Sorty-Rum have another answer to the leads that Luke Leal wants to play? Especially if Luke Leal bans Kinu once again. Because that could be just, once again, really debilitating for a lot of the ways in which Sorty-Rum has kind of centralized his support options. Like, if you look at Sorty-Rum's team, there's really 2 support options in there. You've got your Kinu and your Mashuk. This is fine, by the way. It's not like this is a bad thing. It just means that in terms of reinforcing your offensive cores, it's just that much harder for Sorty-Rum to do if somebody hard targets those. You're still facing a bag full of knives if you do so, but you're facing a bag full of knives with, like, no reinforcement in terms of their defense, to belabor this analogy. Right, so this is what we usually see in Luke Leal's pick ban phase, which is that he doesn't give us any hints. He just thinks it all through in his head and then just goes for his option. Obviously, he pick banned Kinu last time. Well, he banned Kinu last time, so it's likely he might be doing that again. That said, he goes for the Mashuk first. This is interesting. So he leaves the Kinu open. Now, I'm assuming this is also because he knows that he can counterpick effectively into the Kinu Yowler lead if he has orange. This is something I expect Luke Leal to be able to come up with an answer for. We'll have to see if this is in fact the case. One thing that would be interesting is if we see the Kinu Yowler come out for Sorty-Rum and then like a first pick Mimit off of Luke Leal to copy the Yowler. I don't know how much I like that in practice, just because that also means that you're basically putting up a giant neon sign saying beta burst me. But we'll see what winds up going on with that, because we have an Inky here. The Inky could very well scare something away here. We have an Acronox, which also is really spooky for Kinu if it gets first picked. We do see the first pick of Kinu. It's very safe into this, and it was left open by Luke Leal, so it's not very surprising to see, but it's going to be reinforcing something in that second slot. So obviously, we have a lot of good options here, but the important thing here is that Sorty-Rum gets to counterpick into this. We see double Nature Koish. That's kind of apocalyptic. Yeah, that's pretty spooky. So double Nature Koish means that, of course, we get the usual Mimit Koish combo of double Synergy Master into whatever move you were going to click anyways. And in this case, that move is Water Cutting Lily. You know, only a 120 base power, 3 prio, like, nuke of an ability. It's definitely going to be hitting hard into whatever Sorty-Rum picks. So he needs to make sure he can pick something that can weather this. The problem is, does he actually have something that can weather this effectively? Fire Koish, I don't know if Fire Koish can. Is his plan to out-damage this lead? because if that's his plan, that's awesome. But I need to see that to believe it, because we're looking at plus 50% to the damage of both of these water cutting lilies. This is titanic. We see a ban out of Mimit for Leal as well, so he's denying his opponent the same thing that he's given himself. So we won't get to see any double koi shot of Sortirum today, so that's definitely something to bear in mind. We do see the ban of Mashuk, because of course Luke didn't go anywhere near his Mashuk, which makes sense. So this means that if Sortirum can break this lead, then he's going to have a much better time against everything else that Leal throws at him, since out of the rest of his lineup, it's really only Acronox that walls the vast majority of the rest of what Sortirum's bringing. Like, Two Vine still tears into that. Honestly, Valish, you probably still want to leave in the basket and just pick up your OCR instead. Although Sortirum's hovering over it, it's still, I suppose, if he gets it on a good double in at the start, it can like recover its health into this. But like, it's very concerning to see. He goes for it. I think that's a bit of a risk, given the fact that we have this size bunch that Leal could very easily just pick, and then you've got like a wreck staring down your poor fragile badger boy. It should be very interesting to see, though, as we get into our second game right now. Right, so going into this, right, I've established at length now the fact that, yeah, double nature koi's scary. And that's exactly what we're going to see, as the landing transmog procs, and woof, there we go, double water cutting lily, staring you in the face. Now, the protector buff is going to be instrumental for Sortirum surviving this, because 2 water cutting lilies at plus 50% is not a sentence that you want to hear when you're on the other side. Like, it's very intimidating. So looking at this, I don't think you swap that. I don't think you swap the koi spot. I think you swap in Yowler and you go in swinging and you go in hard. There is no water available for Geyser right now. That hasn't been picked by Sortirum. He left the horse at home, so this means the only option available to him is either pick Hufflepuff into this or pick RTO. I think personally the Yowler is still the better choice, but you will be taking a ton of bricks to the face if you do that. The Valish hits neutrally into this field, but also is much more fragile if it comes in unprotected. So I'm very I feel like that's the higher risk, higher reward play. Like, depending on the speed of Sortirum's Valish, this could very easily be like, you know, swap into Valish, get a good Ketsa off, eat 2 water cutting lilies magically on your Koish, then crystal spike until something dies and hope that you live whatever happens. Now, that's very simplified, and it's something that Leal will adapt to if he sees it. He's very good at changing his game plans if he needs to. Although that said, he can get caught up in a single win condition, so it could very well be the sort of thing where we see, like, Sortirum catch him off guard with a play, and then he kind of, like, has to adapt. And depending on how long that takes, that could be Sortirum just carving into his team. Now, all this is conjecture. At this point, what we are seeing is 2 water cutting lilies staring this Koish in the face. And definitely, I think that's going to wind up being the target on this. I do not think the Kinu is going to get hit by anything this turn, because nothing in the back resists coming into the Koish slot the 2 water cutting lilies. So it just has to sit there and eat that pressure and hope it can take a kill in return. Otherwise, Sortirum's going to be on a very poor footing for the rest of this match. So as we get into this first turn, we do see the Kinu swap. It is for the Yowler. All right, so this is in some ways the safer one, because you're basically guaranteed to, like, probably survive 2 hits. Next, the Quetzalino does outspeed. This is a faster question. It does, oh man, 45% thanks to the Ice Cube on the standard Koish. Interesting that he went for the standard Koish rather than the Mimit. The Mimit is usually the frailer of the 2 Koish, and we see that the double in is going to eviscerate this Koish, even after the protector buff. That brings it down to 37%. The second one's coming down, and the Geyser just goes straight out of this match. The double water cutting lilies tearing into Sortirum as immediately he goes in for the Kinu buff. This makes a lot of sense. You just want to get your Kinu buffed up fast. This is going to be kind of a nightmare if Leal's momentum cannot be stopped here. at this point, bringing in the Kinu also means that you're limiting the line of fire of Luke. Leal, either it incentivizes his repositioning, because then, you know, you don't really want to be hitting with a Kinu with like ice cubes or water cutting lily. You could probably take it down with water cutting lily at this rate, but like, is that the best use of your time when you've got a Yowler right there that you could be hitting that only has +1/+1 at the moment? Now, I don't know if you take it down with a +1/+1, but I do know that Luke Leal calcs obsessively. And if he keeps both nature Koish in, then one can expect that will in fact probably 2KO this Yowler from this percentage. This is still a 50% buff. We saw that to a +1/+1 neutral, neutral to the damaged fish. Granted, fish are much less bulky, but that Koish still went down to 37% off a single one. Yowler, even with its much bigger bulk, that's looking to take a lot from those. Still, though, I think that now that Sortirum's committed to this, I think he's committed to this. I do think you could probably get away with a suplex this turn onto the Koish spot if you're expecting both of them to stay in and you just got to take that punishment, because I do not think you can afford to show off in the face of 2 tactical nukes like we're seeing right now. The water cutting lilies come out, he's sticking in with his guns, and he is firing them straight at this Yowler. It goes down to 63%. It is not enough. The beta burst goes down onto the other Koish. It is not enough to bring it anywhere close to things, but instead we see a rainbow guard come out. This will, of course, block the suplex from Yowler, meaning it is unable to continue pressing into that, and it just loses its hold for the move, loses stamina out of it. It's just a free ride for Luke Leal there, thanks to that evade. Delightful status effect that we're seeing a lot more of lately, thanks to things like Obi-Wan-O. But this also gives Luke Leal the chance to reposition. It could be that he was testing the waters there, if you'll pardon the pun, as to whether he was actually able to take that down. But no, instead he commits. He just wanted that one extra one in there now that he knows that he deals just over a third, and he's going to sacrifice his Koish to take down this Yowler. Oh my god, it's like the little tap before breaking the iceberg as the Yowler goes down to 2 more water cutting lilies. He OXs on both fish, but I think that was 100% worth it out of Luke Leal, as he has massively gained momentum inside this match, still has his Mimit available to swap out if he chooses, and that is one of the biggest win conditions on Sortirum's side out of the game. That's Fire Koish and Yowler gone. Sortirum needs to have an answer to this. Now, one real good answer to this is Valish, but the problem is we could very easily see like Acronox or Sizemunch come in here, and these 2 crystals hate those earths. This is why this is so important. That Yowler was like his bulwark against the back line of Luke Leal. Throwing that in now and keeping it in when you saw you took a third to that was a very risky play, and it definitely paid off in Luke Leal's favor here. Now, looking at what he would want to do into this, though, right, 2 Vine means that if you're expecting the Acronox, that is just unilaterally the better play, but he goes for the Valish instead, hoping to get a Madness buff off before everything starts catching fire on Luke Leal's side. He gives him a little bit of time to like get himself in a position where he can kind of power through a lot of what Luke Leal has. If any Tem is able to do this, it's Valish with its Scavenger. Of course, getting 20% back from KOs of any Tem on the field is a really powerful ability. Definitely a really valuable Tem to use that on, especially since you also get, of course, the Madness buff on the special variants. Getting that +2 special attack and +2 special defense just means you can carve things apart and just, you Crystal Spike the world away. Now, he swaps out the Kinu. This means that he will, of course, get the Kinu back later on. That's another valuable part of this mechanism in which you can generally reposition for free buffs. It's a very powerful maneuver. And in the meantime, we see the Yukama set up like a loaded gun over on Luke Leal's side. Definitely a frightening thing to see. The Sting comes down onto 2Vine, trying to catch the Kinu off guard, but it also traps in the 2Vine, preventing further Kinu plays onto the Valish specifically here. Now, that said, we did just see the Valish pop off. It now has its Crystal Spikes up and ready. It's got its Madness buff. It is +2 special attack, and that is when, of course, Valish are at their most threatening. Definitely the kind of situation where, like, this Yukama had better be able to survive this. So, speaking of which, the Yukama stays in, so I'm guessing it probably does. Yes, it does at 21.3%. The Tornado comes down, spreading the aggression instead onto the Acronox. The snare pops off, stealing the sweatband off of Valish, which is massive. And the water cannon still does a ton to the Valish alongside that. The Venom spread coming down as well, not doing anywhere near as much in comparison to anything, but most importantly, thanks to the cobwebs triggering on any poison target, trapping in the Valish and forcing it to find a kill. Now that said, I do think that it is possible for him to find a kill. I do also think that it is not where he thinks it is. Now, you do still have to punish and pressure the Yukama slot here, because if you don't, you get Aquatic Whirlwind and you die. Crystal Dust has to come out this turn, because that's 4 prio. It will, in most likelihoods, outspeed the Yukama's Aquatic Whirlwind and allow you the KO on that side. This is why I don't think that's going to stay there. I think that turns into Size Munch. But I think you have to let that turn into Size Munch, or alternately into Mimit that turns into Acronox, and then, like, go straight into the Acronox on the other side. You Feathergat that as hard as you can. I don't think you get the KO, but hopefully you create enough space that you can. It's that, or you just double into the Acronox lock, hoping to live. Problem is, you have to live that. So we do see the Mimit. It is double Acronox. This is going to be a very hard thing for Swordium to break here. And we do actually see the other Acronox bounce for the Size Munch. So if he has spread that, but it gets a little bit challenging for him. So we see the Crystal Dust come out, and as you can see, it is massive. And the spread of the damage winds up costing him the Valish. Because of the double swap there from Leal, he has managed to not actually get everything where he needed to do. Like the Feather Gatling onto the Size Munch. Of course, if that was still the Acronox, there's no telling whether that would have taken it out as well. The double in onto the Mimit may have been the way out there, but in the meantime, we now have 2 Vine and a Kinu against the world. Now, the Kinu can still definitely do a lot into a lot of what Leal has left, but it's got to keep the 2 Vine alive to deal with those Acronoxes. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare. And this Size Munch has not gone down to that Beta Burst, meaning it's going to be throwing a big fat wreck into this 2 Vine. Now, that is not big enough or fat enough to take it down by any stretch of the imagination. That is not a heated up Size Munch like we saw last game. This is a lot closer, you'll notice, than last game. Like, even though Leal has been popping off, he's definitely not been able to keep the sustain into the late game because Swordium's been allowed to get into a position where he can get so many other things going on here. Like, we saw that Leal kind of had to deal with every threat individually there. The Dimmok, however, does come down onto the Kinu, which is kind of astonishing, but alongside the Sting, it might very well take it out, and it does! Taking out the Kinu means that there's nothing to confront the Size Munch at this point, meaning that now Swordium is forced to split his attention with 2 very stamina-hungry Tems. Well, yeah, with a very stamina-hungry Tem. My mistake there, folks. As he is unable to cement the KO on Acronox, which most likely costs him the game as a result of the overexertion, the Sting, and the uppercut coming out of Size Munch. Well played to Leal, outpacing the aggression of Swordium in this game, and taking away the second game of this best of 2. So, for those who are wondering at home, that is once again a 2-0 to Leal. Well played to both of our contestants inside this. This is by no means the end of this stage whatsoever, and there will be more matches broadcast later on at various points here. Once again, of course, though, I'd like to just capstone this by taking note of the cool stuff that we got to see there. Obviously, it's very good to see 2 Vine into this, and it did a lot into Leal's team. But on top of that, the double nature equation, the way that Leal piloted that opener in order to get what he knew was going to be a right amount of damage onto Yowler, and then whether the one attack that really hurt everything and would have dismantled his lead in the suplex with the Rainbow Guard, and then just going immediately in again and again and heavily investing into that with the hard overexertions paid off in so much. That alongside taking out the Fire Quash so quickly early on, it was very hard for Swordium to adapt to that. And while it may look here like Swordium just kind of got curb stomped, remember that he really did a lot to recover his ground after those positions. The problem in TemTeam can be very, very much that, you lose enough ground early, it is very hard to make it back. You lose a Tem without getting value out of that Tem, and that's such a problem. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled. We have some more matches just tomorrow, as a matter of fact, between a couple other contestants. I will get those up for you right now, just in terms of what those are. I believe we have a nice big ol' slot tomorrow of, first off, Srizen versus Wiki Kernel a bit earlier in the day, followed by Jay Duragon versus Zukli in, I believe, one slot, then followed by, of course, Jay Duragon versus Sortirum again, and then finally, last but not least inside our next slots for tomorrow, Tsubaki-chan versus Srizen. So keep your eyes peeled, and thank you so much. I've been Quarter, and this has been the TemTeam Cup. I look forward to seeing you again.